I'm done funding your pathetic lifestyle. My husband sneered after my promotion, demanding separate accounts. Crushed by his public humiliation, I agreed. That Sunday, when my mother arrived for lunch and stepped into the kitchen, her horrified scream shattered the silence, sending panicked neighbors flooding into our yard. I'm done funding your pathetic lifestyle. Ryan's words hung in our kitchen like smoke from a fire I hadn't seen coming. I stood at the granite island, the one I'd picked out, paid for, and cleaned religiously for 6 years, arranging prosciutto-wrapped asparagus on a slate serving board. My hands didn't shake. They kept working, placing each piece in perfect rows, the way I'd been arranging my entire life around his ego without even realizing I'd forgotten what my own preferences looked like. Before we continue, I want to thank you for being here and sharing stories of women finding their voice. If you believe invisible labor deserves recognition, please consider subscribing. It's free and helps us reach more women who need to hear this. Now let's see how this unfolds. He leaned against the doorframe in his expensive athletic gear, the kind that cost $200 per outfit, all purchased with my credit card, and watched me like he was waiting for a reaction. His face had that expression I'd started recognizing over the past few months. Rehearsed confrontation. Like he'd been building up to this moment in the locker room mirror at his gym, convincing himself he was right, that he was finally standing up for himself. Against what exactly, I wasn't sure. Separate accounts, he continued, his voice gaining confidence from my silence. Effective immediately. What's mine is mine. What's yours is yours. We split everything 50-50. Fair is fair. Fair. The word tasted like metal in my mouth. I set down the serving tongs with deliberate care and turned to face him fully. If that's what you want. He blinked. That wasn't the script he'd prepared for. He'd expected tears, maybe. Begging. An argument about how we were supposed to be partners, how marriage meant sharing everything. He'd wanted me to fight so he could feel justified in whatever narrative he'd constructed about being taken advantage of. Really? He straightened, thrown off balance. Just like that. Just like that. I kept my voice perfectly level, perfectly calm. We'll open separate accounts this week. Transfer everything. Start fresh. Relief flooded his face so obviously it would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. Good. That's good. I'll set mine up tomorrow. He paused at the kitchen entrance and I saw him gather himself for one more jab, one more twist of the knife. Maybe this will teach you some financial responsibility. Then he left, to meet his gym buddies for drinks that I'd be paying for at least one more time. I stood alone in the kitchen that smelled like rosemary and something burning, though nothing was in the oven. The scent was just us, I realized. Our marriage going up in flames so slowly I'd gotten used to the smoke. My pathetic lifestyle. I looked around at the space I'd created. The herb garden on the windowsill that I watered every morning. The knife set I'd researched for weeks before purchasing. The Le Creuset Dutch oven I'd saved for because Ryan said we couldn't afford it, while somehow affording another kettlebell certification that cost $800 and earned him exactly 0 additional clients. This kitchen, this house, this entire life, I'd built it. Paid for it. Maintained it. While Ryan posted Instagram photos with captions about grinding and empire building to his 247 followers, most of whom were probably bots. I pulled out my laptop and sat at the kitchen table. For a moment I just stared at the screen, my reflection ghostly in the black glass. When had I started looking so tired? When had the lines around my eyes gotten so deep? Then I opened our bank accounts. All of them. The personal checking account we'd shared for 6 years. The savings account I'd been funding. The credit cards, 3 of them, all in my name because Ryan's credit was complicated. I pulled up statements. 6 years of statements. Started downloading PDFs, organizing files, creating folders by year. Mortgage payments, all from my account. Property taxes, my account. Insurance, my account. Utilities, my account. Groceries, my account. The vacation to Turks and Caicos that Ryan had posted about like he'd paid for it, hashtagging #blessed and #living my best life. $4 $200 from my credit card. His business expenses told their own story. New athletic wear every month, $200 to $300. Supplements and protein powders, $300 to $400. Photography equipment for Instagram, $1,800. A website redesign he'd used exactly once, $2,500. Gym membership at the premium facility across town instead of the community center. $199 monthly for 4 years straight. I created a spreadsheet. Started entering numbers. The work was mechanical, soothing almost. Column for date. Column for expense category. Column for amount. Column for who paid. Year 1 appeared on screen in color-coded glory. I'd contributed $54,000 to our household. Ryan had contributed $8,000. Year 2, $61,000 from me. $7,200 from him. Year 3, 4, 5, 6. The pattern never changed. My contributions climbed as my salary increased with each promotion at Morrison Digital. His hovered around $650 monthly, barely enough to cover utilities, certainly not enough to justify the athletic gear and supplements and certifications that kept appearing on my credit card statements. The final total made my hands stop moving on the keyboard. Me $384,000. Ryan, $47,000. 89%. I'd been paying 89% of our expenses for 6 years while he told me I was financially irresponsible. While he built his brand, that earned maybe $3,200 total in 18 months. While he posted motivational quotes about hustle culture and grinding and never giving up on your dreams. I'd been his dream. His meal ticket. His unpaid personal assistant, chef, housekeeper, and financial backer all rolled into one increasingly exhausted package. And he just accused me of leeching off him. I saved the file as financial_truth.xlsx and backed it up 3 different ways. Cloud storage, external hard drive, USB drive that I tucked into my work bag. Then I sat back and looked at the numbers glowing on my screen like evidence at a trial. This was power. This was proof. This was ammunition I hoped I'd never have to use but knew I probably would. Because 12 years at Morrison Digital had taught me something Ryan had never bothered to learn. Documentation beats narrative every single time. He could tell himself whatever story he wanted about our marriage, about my spending habits, about his entrepreneurial journey. But numbers didn't lie. I thought about the promotion they'd offered me 3 days ago. Vice President of Digital Marketing. Corner office on the 14th floor with windows overlooking downtown. Company car. A hybrid sedan, professional and practical. 20% raise that would bring my salary to $165,000 annually. I'd come home so excited to tell Ryan, already imagining how we'd celebrate. Maybe finally book that trip to Italy I'd been suggesting for years. Maybe renovate the master bathroom that still had fixtures from the 1990s. Maybe just go out to a nice dinner where I didn't have to cook or clean up afterward. Instead, he'd looked at me across this same granite island and said, "So now you'll be working even more hours?" Not congratulations. Not, "I'm proud of you." Not even, "Tell me about it." Just accusation like my success was somehow a personal affront to him. I tried to explain. The opportunity. The team I'd be leading. The projects we'd be launching. But he'd walked away mid-sentence to check his phone, dismissed everything I'd accomplished with the casual cruelty of someone who'd forgotten, or never known, that I was a person separate from him with my own ambitions and achievements that had nothing to do with managing his life. That night I'd made his favorite dinner anyway. Herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables and wild rice. I'd set the table with cloth napkins. Poured wine. Created an atmosphere for celebration even if he wouldn't. He'd eaten it scrolling through Instagram, liking posts, leaving comments on other fitness influencers' photos. Great gains, bro, and killing it, and respect the grind. I'd watched him and felt something inside me crack. Not break, not yet. Just crack. A hairline fracture in whatever foundation I'd built our marriage on, the one where I'd convinced myself that supporting his dreams meant sacrificing my own need to be seen, appreciated, valued. My colleague Jennifer had asked me last week, during a late night finishing a presentation, if I had a husband or a teenage son at home. The question had stung more than she'd probably intended. "Why do you ask?" I'd said, trying to keep my voice light. "Because you're always packing his gym bag," she'd pointed out. "Laying out his clothes. Managing his schedule. My sister does that for her 16-year-old and she can't wait for him to leave for college." I'd laughed it off. Made some joke about Ryan being high maintenance, in a way that suggested it was charming rather than exhausting. But driving home that night her words had echoed in my head. When had I become his mother instead of his wife? When had managing his basic life tasks become my responsibility? When had I stopped expecting him to be an actual partner and started accepting him as a dependent I funded and organized and accommodated? The answers were somewhere in these spreadsheets. In 6 years of increasingly unbalanced contributions. In the slow erosion of expectations until I'd forgotten I was allowed to have any. I closed my laptop and looked around the kitchen again. The dinner party supplies I'd been preparing when Ryan dropped his bombs sat abandoned on the counter. We were supposed to host 6 people tomorrow night. Colleagues from my work, friends I'd been promising we'd have over for months. Another event I'd planned. Another meal I'd shop for, cook and clean up after. Another performance of the perfect marriage where I did everything and Ryan showed up looking good in his expensive athletic wear, charming everyone with his smile and his talk about his business ventures. I picked up my phone and started texting. Hey everyone, so sorry but we need to reschedule tomorrow's dinner. Something came up. Rain check soon. The responses came quickly. Understanding. Supportive. No problem. Then I texted Ryan, wherever he was with his gym friends at whatever bar I'd be paying for. Cancelled tomorrow's party. We need to talk about the separate accounts logistics. I'm free this weekend to set everything up. His response was almost immediate. Great. The sooner the better. I smiled at my phone. He had no idea what he'd just agreed to. No idea that separate finances meant I'd stop being his invisible support system. Stop cooking his meals, doing his laundry, managing his calendar, funding his lifestyle. No idea that 50-50 meant actual 50-50, that he'd be responsible for his half of a mortgage he couldn't afford, utilities he'd never paid attention to, groceries he'd never had to budget for. No idea that the comfortable life he'd been living, the one he'd convinced himself he'd earned through his entrepreneurial journey, was about to disappear. As I was done. Done being invisible. Done being taken for granted. Done funding someone else's delusions while my own accomplishments got dismissed with accusations and contempt. Ryan wanted separate accounts? He'd get exactly what he asked for. And in the process he'd learn what I'd actually been contributing all along. The spreadsheet glowed on my laptop screen like a confession written in numbers. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark, the only light coming from the display, and watched 6 years of my marriage reduce itself to columns and calculations that couldn't be argued with or explained away. Year 1, year 2, year 3, the pattern never varied. My contributions climbed steadily upward as promotions came and my salary grew. Ryan stayed flat, a stubborn horizontal line hovering around $650 monthly, occasionally dipping lower when his business expenses ate into even that meager amount. I added another tab to the spreadsheet. Called it Business ROI. Ryan's fitness coaching venture. The dream he'd been chasing for 18 months while I funded our life. Total invested, $47,800. Website design and hosting, photography equipment, certifications, marketing materials, athletic wear for brand consistency, supplements he claimed he needed to look the part, travel to fitness expos, booth fees, business cards he'd ordered 3 times because the first 2 versions weren't on brand. Total earned $3,200. I stared at that number. $3,200 over 18 months. Less than $200 monthly. Barely enough to cover his own gym membership, which he justified as a business necessity, because clients want to train where their coach trains. The math was brutal. For every dollar Ryan's business earned, I'd invested $15 keeping it afloat. That wasn't entrepreneurship. That was an expensive hobby I'd been funding without realizing I hadn't agreed to it. I created another tab. Daily operations. This one hurt more because it cataloged the invisible work, the tasks I'd been performing so automatically I'd stopped thinking of them as labor at all. Meal planning and grocery shopping. 6 hours weekly. Cooking. 8 to 10 hours weekly. Cleaning. 6 hours weekly. Laundry 3 hours weekly. Household management. Bills, appointments, maintenance, repairs. 4 hours weekly. 27 hours weekly minimum. At $50 per hour. Less than I'd pay a housekeeper or personal assistant. That was $1,350 weekly. Nearly $70,000 annually in unpaid domestic labor. Added to the financial imbalance, I'd been contributing roughly $140,000 yearly to our household while Ryan contributed maybe $15,000 when you counted both his money and his minimal time investment. My phone buzzed. Text from Ryan, out with the guys. Don't wait up. I looked at the message and did quick math. Ryan's gym friends typically hit the downtown bars, craft beer places where pints ran $8 to $12 each. He'd buy at least 4 over the course of the night, plus appetizers to keep a base. $60, maybe $70. All charged to the credit card I'd be paying off at the end of the month. For 2 more weeks anyway. Then the separate accounts would be finalized and Ryan's bar tabs would become Ryan's problem. I saved the spreadsheet one more time and finally closed my laptop. The kitchen fell into complete darkness. Outside, I could hear our neighbor's dog barking, someone's car door slamming, the ambient noise of suburban Sunday night winding down. Inside, silence. I sat in that silence and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly. Not satisfaction. But clarity. Pure, crystalline clarity about what my marriage actually was versus what I'd been pretending it was. Monday morning arrived wrapped in fog, the kind of gray Connecticut dawn that made everything look washed out and tired. I woke at 5:30 a.m. to my alarm, the same time I'd been waking for 6 years. But this time I only made coffee for one. I pulled out my favorite mug, the handmade ceramic one I'd bought at a craft fair 3 years ago. Ryan had been using it lately, claiming it held heat better than his other mugs, which was Ryan speak for, I like this and I'm taking it. I'd stopped arguing about small things like mugs years ago. Picked my battles. Let him have his way on the little stuff to avoid conflict on the big stuff. Except the big stuff never got addressed either, did it? I'd just gotten quieter and smaller until I'd nearly disappeared. Not anymore. I made my coffee slowly, deliberately. Used the French press Ryan had always said was too much work. Bloomed the grounds properly, let them steep exactly 4 minutes, pressed slowly to avoid sediment. The ritual felt meditative. I made myself a real breakfast. Scrambled eggs with herbs from the garden. Whole wheat toast with the expensive butter I usually saved for special occasions. Fresh strawberries I'd bought for myself. At 7 a.m. Ryan emerged from the bedroom looking like he always did, bleary-eyed, hair disheveled, moving with the unconscious expectation that his morning would be managed for him. He stopped short in the kitchen doorway. The coffee maker sat empty and cold. No breakfast warming on the stove. Just me sitting at the table with my tablet eating my meal for one. Where's breakfast? He asked. Not mean exactly. Just genuinely confused like he'd walked into the wrong house. I didn't look up from the article I was reading. Cabinet's right there. Cereals on the second shelf. Bread for toast. Eggs in the fridge if you know how to cook them. Silence. I could feel him processing, trying to reconcile this version of our morning with the routine we'd established over 6 years. You're not making anything? Now I looked up, met his eyes calmly. Separate finances means separate meals, Ryan. You wanted independence. This is what it looks like. His jaw tightened. I watched him search for an argument that wouldn't contradict his own logic from 3 days ago. He came up empty. He grabbed a protein bar from the pantry, one I'd bought last week in bulk but wouldn't be buying anymore, and left without another word. The front door closed. His car started. The garage door rumbled up and down. Then silence again. I sat in that silence and felt it differently than I had the night before. Not clarity this time. Something lighter. Something that felt almost like freedom. For 6 years I'd been orchestrating his mornings. Coffee ready when he woke. Gym bag packed. Clothes laid out. Breakfast prepared. Lunch packed if he asked for it. His entire morning choreographed by me so he could roll out of bed and into his day without thinking. Now he'd have to think. Plan. Manage his own basic needs. The smallest change, but it felt enormous. That afternoon during my lunch break I created a new spreadsheet. This one forward-facing instead of backward-looking. Household expenses 50/50 split. I listed everything methodically. Mortgage, $3,300 monthly. His half, $1,650. Property taxes, $420 monthly. His half, $210. Home insurance, $145 monthly. His half, $72.50. Utilities averaging $340 monthly. His half, $170. Internet and streaming services, $180 monthly. His half, $90. Yard maintenance, $160 monthly. His half, $80. Total, $2,272.50 monthly. Not including groceries, which we'd split separately. Not including gas, car insurance, personal items, medical expenses, anything individual. Just the cost of keeping the house running, the house I'd been paying for almost entirely alone while Ryan contributed his token $650 and called it partnership. I set up a shared spreadsheet with automatic payment reminders. Created a system where every bill would generate a Venmo request to Ryan for his exact half. Made it professional, organized, impossible to ignore or argue with. The first bill arrived Wednesday. Water and sewer, $340 for the month. I looked at that number and calculated. Our subdivision had expensive water rates, but that total was inflated by Ryan's hour-long post-workout showers and the lawn sprinkler system he'd insisted we install 2 years ago because curb appeal matters. I'd argued it was wasteful. He'd said I was being cheap. We'd installed it. I'd paid for it. He'd enjoyed the greenest lawn on our street and posted photos of it on Instagram with hashtags about investing in your property. I sent him a Venmo request, $170. Added a cheerful note, your half of water bill, thanks. His text came back within minutes. This is ridiculous. It's just the water bill. I responded immediately, and you owe half. That's what separate finances means. Due by Friday, please. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Finally, fine. The Venmo payment arrived Thursday morning. I could feel his anger through the transaction, through the lack of any note or acknowledgement. Just money transferred with resentment. Good. Let him be angry. Let him feel what I'd been feeling every time I paid another bill he'd racked up and I'd be responsible for. Every time I funded another expense he'd justified as necessary while calling me irresponsible. 2 weeks into our new arrangement, my office phone rang mid-afternoon. Margaret's name on the caller ID made my stomach tighten reflexively. 6 years of conditioning, of being judged and found slightly wanting by the woman who'd raised the man who took me for granted. Lauren, darling. Her voice had that courtroom attorney quality, friendly but commanding. I'm coming for Sunday lunch this week. Ryan mentioned you're making your famous cocoa vin. Famous. I'd made it exactly 3 times, all for Margaret's visits. All because Ryan had volunteered my labor without asking first. I almost laughed. Almost. But the sound that came out was more tired than amused. I'm sorry, Margaret, but I won't be cooking Sunday. Silence. The kind that meant I'd violated some unspoken protocol. Excuse me. Her tone shifted. Confused. Slightly offended. Ryan and I have separate finances now, I explained, keeping my voice pleasant and professional, the same tone I used with difficult clients. Cooking elaborate meals isn't in my budget anymore. You're welcome to come, but you'll need to arrange your own food. More silence. I could hear her breathing, processing, trying to reconcile this information with the daughter-in-law she thought she knew. But Sunday lunch is tradition, Lauren. We've been doing this for 6 years. 6 years. 6 years of me cooking for her while she complimented Ryan on choosing such a capable wife. 6 years of her son eating my food while telling me I needed to be more financially responsible. Then Ryan can cook, I said. Or you can bring something. Either way works for me. I hung up before she could argue. Professional. Polite. Final. Then I pulled out my personal calendar and marked Sunday with 2 words. The reveal. 4 days. 4 days until Margaret arrived expecting her cocoa vin and found something very, very different. 4 days until the truth became undeniable. 4 days felt like 4 years. I moved through that week with the strange clarity that comes from knowing everything is about to change. Every conversation with Ryan became loaded with subtext. Every meal I made for myself alone felt like a small revolution. Every bill that arrived felt like another piece of evidence building toward an inevitable conclusion. Wednesday evening I came home from work to find the kitchen in disarray. Not the usual disarray of Ryan's protein shake preparation. Something more chaotic. Pots on the stove. Cutting board with vegetables hacked into uneven pieces. The smell of something burning. Ryan stood at the counter with his phone propped against the backsplash, watching a YouTube video titled, Coke Oven for Beginners. I set down my work bag and watched him for a moment. He was so focused on the video he hadn't noticed me yet. His face had that intense concentration I usually only saw when he was scrolling through other fitness influencers' accounts, studying their content strategy. "What are you doing?" I asked. He jumped, nearly knocked over a bottle of wine he'd opened. My expensive Burgundy, I noticed, not the cooking wine in the pantry. "Practicing," he said defensively. "For Sunday." I looked at the mess he'd created. The chicken pieces were hacked apart unevenly. The vegetables looked like they'd been attacked rather than chopped. Flour dusted the floor. Something in a pan was smoking ominously. "Need help?" I asked, testing him. His jaw tightened. "I've got it." I shrugged and walked away. Poured myself a glass of water. Listened to him struggle with something the video made look simple. 20 minutes later I heard him swear. Then the sound of the smoke detector going off. I walked back to find him frantically waving a dish towel at the ceiling alarm while something in the pan sent up black smoke. He'd burned the garlic. Added it first to hot oil instead of waiting for the other aromatics. And now it was acrid and ruined, poisoning whatever else he tried to cook in that pan. "You have to add garlic later," I said calmly over the alarm's shrieking. "It burns faster than onions or celery." He didn't respond. Just kept waving the towel until the alarm finally stopped. I left him there and went upstairs to change. Behind me I heard him dump the pan in the sink, the hiss of hot metal hitting water, another round of creative cursing. An hour later the kitchen looked like a disaster zone. Every pot we owned was dirty. Flour covered the counters. Something sticky had spilled and congealed on the floor. The trash can overflowed with failed attempts. Burnt vegetables, ruined sauce, chicken pieces he'd somehow managed to both undercook and burn simultaneously. Ryan stood in the middle of it all, looking defeated. "How do you do this?" he asked quietly. Not to me exactly. More to the universe. "How do you make it look so easy?" I could have said, practice, experience, actually caring about the outcome. I said nothing. Just looked at the destruction he'd created trying to do something I'd been doing effortlessly for years. He pulled out his phone and started scrolling. 5 minutes later I heard him on a call. "Yes, delivery on Sunday. 1 p.m. sharp. The prix menu for 3. Yes, the cocoa vin definitely. No, this is the right address." I calculated quickly. Lou Bernardine's prix Sunday menu ran about $60 per person. 3 people. Plus delivery fee, tip, tax. Probably $180 total. Maybe $200. Money Ryan didn't have. Money he'd have to pull from somewhere. His meager savings, maybe, or the credit card he'd been trying to rebuild after maxing it out on business expenses 2 years ago. When he hung up, he looked at me standing in the doorway. "Mom likes Lou Bernardine," he said. Defensive. Justifying. "I know," I replied. "I've been ordering from there for her birthday for 4 years." His face did something complicated. Recognition, maybe, of another invisible task I'd been handling. Another expense I'd been covering. Another detail of his mother's life that I'd been managing so he could take credit. Saturday night, I sat on the couch with a novel I'd been trying to finish for weeks. Finally had time to read now that I wasn't spending my evenings cooking elaborate meals and managing Ryan's schedule. Ryan was back in the kitchen. I could hear him muttering to himself, the clang of pots, water running, the microwave beeping. Around 9 p.m. he appeared in the living room doorway. "The delivery tomorrow is at 1 o'clock, he said. "Mom's coming at 1 o'clock. So timing should work." I didn't look up from my book. "Okay. I'm going to set the table tonight. With the good china. Make it look nice." "Okay." He hovered there, clearly wanting something from me. Validation maybe. Or permission. Or acknowledgement that he was trying. I gave him nothing. Just kept reading. He disappeared back into the dining room. I heard him opening the china cabinet, the clink of plates and glasses. 20 minutes later he was back. "Do we have cloth napkins?" "Linen closet. Second shelf." More sounds of preparation. Ryan playing house, performing domesticity for his mother's benefit. I turned the page in my book and smiled. Sunday morning arrived bright and cold. I woke at 7 a.m., late for me, and made my single cup of coffee. Put on comfortable clothes. Decided to work in the garden. By 10 a.m. I was outside with my roses when Claire Caldwell appeared at the fence line between our properties, coffee mug in hand. "Morning, Lauren," she said. "Big lunch today?" I looked toward our house. Through the dining room window I could see Ryan frantically adjusting place settings, stepping back to examine his work, adjusting again. Ryan's mother is visiting, I said, turning back to deadhead a spent bloom. Claire leaned against the fence. Is everything okay with you too? Mark mentioned. She trailed off delicately. Mark. Her husband. Whose home office shared a wall with our kitchen. What did Mark mention? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. He heard some intense conversations last week. Not yelling exactly, but tension. We just wanted to make sure you're okay. I could have lied. Could have smiled and said everything was fine, that we were just working through some normal marriage stuff, nothing to worry about. Instead I met Claire's eyes. She was a CPA, sharp with numbers and patterns. Probably saw through financial facades for a living. We're going through some changes, I said. Financial restructuring. Her eyebrows rose. That sounds complicated. I pulled off my gardening gloves. It's actually very simple. We're just being honest about who pays for what now. Claire processed this. I could see her mind working, connecting dots I hadn't explicitly drawn. Financial restructuring, she repeated slowly. As in, separating finances? As in acknowledging reality, I said. Reality that was apparently very different from what Ryan had convinced himself was happening. Claire's expression shifted. Understanding, recognition. Something that looked almost like solidarity. Well, she said carefully, if you need anything, someone to talk to, a friendly ear, whatever, I'm right next door. She squeezed my arm gently before walking back to her house. I returned to my roses, but my mind wasn't on gardening anymore. I just planted a seed with Claire. A witness who'd be paying attention. Someone who'd notice when the facade cracked completely. At 12:45 p.m. I came inside to wash the dirt off my hands. The dining room table looked almost elegant. Ryan had managed that much at least. Wedding china set precisely. Linen napkins folded. Wine glasses sparkling. The Lou Bernardine delivery bag sat on the kitchen counter, still sealed, waiting to be plated. Ryan emerged from the bedroom wearing dress pants and a button-down shirt. Making an effort for his mother. Looking the part of successful son even if the reality underneath was shaky. She'll be here in 15 minutes, he said. I looked down at my gardening clothes. Old jeans, dirt-stained t-shirt, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I know, I said and went upstairs to change. When I came back down, dressed in casual but presentable clothes, Margaret's silver BMW was pulling into our driveway. Ryan straightened his shoulders. Took a breath. Prepared himself for performance. I watched him through the front window and felt nothing. No anxiety. No desire to smooth things over or make this easier for him. Just cold curiosity about what would happen when Margaret encountered reality instead of the son she'd imagined. The doorbell rang at exactly 1 p.m. Margaret didn't believe in being fashionably late. Ryan opened the door. Mom. Right on time as always. She swept in wearing cream cashmere and pearls, air-kissing Ryan's cheek before her sharp eyes found me. Lauren. Her tone could have frozen water. 6 years of that tone. 6 years of subtle disapproval dressed up as concern. 6 years of being judged and found slightly wanting by the woman who'd raised the man taking me for granted. Margaret. Lovely to see you, I replied with matching coolness. She moved toward the dining room, her heels clicking precisely on our hardwood floors. Stopped at the threshold. The table looked beautiful. China gleaming. Crystals sparkling. Everything positioned perfectly. Except in the center, instead of serving dishes with home-cooked food, sat 3 white takeout containers from Lou Bernardine, still in their delivery bag. Margaret's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion. Disbelief. Something approaching horror. What is this? Her voice rose half an octave. Where's the home-cooked meal? Ryan stepped forward quickly, playing damage control. Change of plans, Mom. I ordered from Lou Bernardine. You love there. You ordered. She turned to look at him like he'd announced he was joining a cult. Why didn't Lauren cook? Her eyes swung to me. Accusatory. Demanding explanation. This was it. The moment I'd been building toward for 2 weeks. I stepped into the dining room, wine glass in hand, perfectly calm. Because cooking elaborate meals for free isn't part of our new financial arrangement, Margaret. The words landed like stones in still water. Ripples spreading outward. Financial arrangement? She repeated slowly, testing the phrase. Ryan wanted separate finances, I explained pleasantly, like discussing the weather. So now we split everything 50-50, including labor. He volunteered to handle Sunday lunch and he did. By ordering $180 worth of catering. I watched that number register. Watched Margaret's lawyer brain start calculating, questioning, assembling a case. Ryan, she said, turning to her son. You spent $180 on takeout? He shifted his weight. It's fine, Mom. I can afford it. The lie sat there between them, obvious and pathetic. I decided to push harder. Test how much truth Margaret could handle. Can you? I asked. Because the mortgage is due Tuesday and your half is $1,650. Plus $170 for utilities. And $280 for groceries we agreed to split. That's $2,100 by Tuesday, Ryan. The color drained from his face. Margaret turned to him with an expression I'd never seen her wear. Not anger exactly, but something colder. Sharper. Calculation. Ryan Michael, she said, using his full name. What is she talking about? Ryan opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. No sound came out. Margaret's question hung in the air between them, heavy and unanswerable. What is she talking about? I watched Ryan's face cycle through options. Denial wouldn't work. I'd already stated specific numbers. Anger would make him look worse. Deflection had failed. He landed on confusion. Mom, it's complicated. Lauren's mixing up. I'm not mixing up anything, I interrupted calmly. Your half of household expenses is $2,272.50 monthly. That's half the mortgage, half the utilities, half the property taxes, half the insurance, half the yard maintenance. The bills are all documented in our shared expense tracker. Margaret's entire demeanor shifted. I watched 30 years of courtroom instincts activate in real time. Her shoulders straightened. Her expression went neutral, professional. When she spoke again, her voice had dropped into that controlled register that meant she was assembling a case. Lauren, she said, turning to face me fully. What exactly is your half of household expenses? I'd been waiting for this question. Preparing for it. I set down my wine glass and met her eyes directly. The same as Ryan's, I said. We split everything equally now. That was his idea. Margaret's eyes narrowed fractionally. And how much are you paying monthly? I could have softened it. Could have presented the information gently with context and explanation. Instead, I chose brutal honesty. About $2,100 for my share of bills. Plus my own groceries, gas, personal items, gym membership, dry cleaning. Around $2,800 total monthly. I watched her process this. Saw her attorney brain already calculating, comparing, searching for the discrepancy she knew was coming. And prior to this arrangement? She asked. This was it. The question that would crack everything open. Prior to this arrangement, I was paying approximately $6,400 monthly. Ryan was contributing around $650. The silence that followed was absolute. Margaret stood perfectly still. Her face went through microexpressions too fast to catalog. Disbelief, calculation, recognition, something that looked almost like grief. That can't be right, she said, but her voice had no conviction. She knew numbers. She knew I wasn't the type to exaggerate or manipulate data. It's right, I said quietly. I have documentation if you'd like to see it. Yes, Margaret said immediately. I would. Ryan made a sound, protest or panic, I couldn't tell which. Mom, this isn't, you don't need to. Ryan. Margaret's voice cut through his stammering like a blade. Be quiet. I walked to my home office, pulled the binder from the drawer where I'd been keeping it and returned to the dining room. 53 pages of documentation, organized with colored tabs. I handed it to Margaret without preamble. 6 years of bank statements, receipts, mortgage payments, credit card bills. Every dollar accounted for. Every contribution tracked. Margaret took the binder like it was evidence in a trial. Which, in a way, it was. She flipped to the summary page first. The overview I'd created with pie charts showing percentage splits year by year. The pattern was identical across all 6 years. My contributions represented 87 to 91% of household expenses while Ryan's hovered between 9 to 13%. At the bottom, highlighted in yellow, Me $384,000. Ryan $47,000. Margaret's hands started trembling. Subtle but visible. She flipped through pages, landing on receipts at random. Ryan's gym membership. $199 monthly for 4 years straight. His supplement purchases. $300 to $400 monthly, every month for 6 years. His business expenses tab was the thickest. New athletic wear, photography equipment, website redesign, business cards, marketing materials, travel to fitness expos. Every single purchase made with my credit card while he told me I was bleeding him dry. Jesus Christ, Margaret whispered. Ryan stepped forward. Mom, you have to understand, I was building something. How much did your business earn? Margaret asked, not looking up from the binder. Silence. Ryan. How much did your fitness coaching business earn over the past 18 months? More silence. About $3,200, I supplied. Total. Over 18 months. Margaret's head snapped up. She looked at her son with an expression I'd never seen her direct at him before. Disappointment. Real, profound disappointment. You invested. She flipped back through the business expenses tab, calculating quickly. Nearly $48,000 to earn $3,200? It takes time to build a brand, Ryan said defensively. You can't expect immediate returns. Did you know, Margaret interrupted, her courtroom voice fully activated now, that Lauren was paying 89% of your household expenses while funding this business venture that earned less than $200 monthly? Ryan's face went red. She makes more than me. Of course she pays more. Then why? Margaret asked, each word precisely enunciated. Did you tell her she was funding your pathetic lifestyle? The question landed like a physical blow. Ryan actually stepped backward. Why did you demand separate accounts? Margaret continued relentlessly. If you were the one benefiting from the arrangement. Why did you accuse her of financial irresponsibility when you were the one spending $400 monthly on supplements while contributing barely enough to cover utilities? Ryan's mouth opened and closed. He looked like he was drowning in open air. Mom, it's not, she's making it sound. Am I? I asked quietly. Which number is wrong, Ryan? Which receipt is fabricated? Which bank statement is inaccurate? He had no answer. Margaret closed the binder carefully. Deliberately. Then she looked at me with something I'd never expected from her. Respect. Maybe even recognition. Lauren, she said quietly. May I use your kitchen? The request was so unexpected, so odd given the context that I just nodded. Of course. I followed her, curious. Ryan trailed behind us, looking like he wanted to object but didn't know how. Margaret walked into the kitchen with the systematic precision of someone gathering evidence. She scanned the space, the clean counters, the organized spice rack, the spotless appliances. Then her eyes landed on the refrigerator. Specifically on the expense tracking sheet I'd printed and magnetized to the door. He walked closer, reading. Monthly shared expenses listed in neat columns. Due dates. Amounts owed. Payment status. Next to Ryan's name highlighted in yellow. Unpaid, 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 unpaid. Margaret's hand went to her mouth. Then she did something that surprised me. She opened the refrigerator door. The interior was divided cleanly down the middle. A piece of tape ran vertically, separating my side from Ryan's. My side. Fresh vegetables in labeled containers. Meal prepped portions with dates written on masking tape. Quality proteins. Dairy. Condiments. The organized refrigerator of someone who planned meals and cooked regularly. Ryan's side. Expired milk 4 days past date. 3 energy drinks. A pizza box with 2 slices of congealed cheese pizza. Nothing else. No vegetables. No fruit. No real food. The dietary habits of a college student, not a married adult. Margaret stared at that division for a long moment. Then she closed the refrigerator and moved to the pantry. She opened the double doors. Inside the same division. A clear line down the middle. My shelves. Organized, abundant, sustainable. Grains in labeled containers. Pasta. Canned goods. Baking supplies. Snacks. Coffee. Everything you'd need to actually cook meals and maintain a household. Ryan's shelves. 6 containers of protein powder. Different brands, different flavors. And nothing else. The visual representation of 6 years of contribution was undeniable. Margaret stood there, doors open, staring at those shelves like they contained answers to questions she'd been afraid to ask. Then she moved to the cabinet under the sink. Pulled out the trash can. It was overflowing. I'd deliberately not emptied it since Saturday. The contents told their own story. Burnt chicken skin from Ryan's failed cooking attempt. Ruined vegetables turned to mush. An entire bag of rice that had somehow solidified into a brick. Garlic cloves blackened beyond recognition. Herbs still in their plastic containers because Ryan hadn't known you needed to remove them first. Evidence of yesterday's disaster. Evidence of a man who'd never had to cook because someone had always done it for him. Margaret's face went from pale to red to purple. She straightened slowly. Turned to look at Ryan. And then she screamed. Not a gasp. Not a cry of dismay. A full-throated horror movie scream that echoed through our house and carried out the open kitchen window into our quiet suburban Sunday afternoon. The sound was primal. Anguished. The sound of a mother realizing her son had become exactly the kind of man she'd spent her legal career protecting women from. Through the window I saw heads turn in neighboring yards. Saw Claire Caldwell look up from her garden. Saw Mr. Harrison pause mid-step on his front walk. Margaret stood in our kitchen, trembling, the binder clutched in one hand, the expense sheet in the other. 6 years, she whispered, her voice breaking. 6 years. Ryan took a step toward her. Mom. Don't, she said, holding up one hand. Don't you dare. Her voice was shaking now. All the courtroom control was gone, replaced by raw emotion. 6 years you let her support you. 6 years you used her money to play at being an entrepreneur while she worked 60-hour weeks. 6 years you called her irresponsible while she kept you afloat. Ryan's face had gone white. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Margaret said. The numbers don't lie, Ryan. The receipts don't lie. This, she gestured at the refrigerator, the pantry, the overflowing trash can, doesn't lie. Outside I could see neighbors gathering. The Caldwells. The Patels. Even Mr. Harrison, who never got involved in anything. Margaret's scream had brought them running, and now they stood in our yard on the sidewalk, peering through windows, phones already out. Recording. Probably streaming to the neighborhood Facebook group that tracked every drama in our subdivision. Margaret looked at me. Her eyes were wet. Lauren, she said. I am so profoundly sorry. Margaret's apology hung in the air, but I could see she wasn't finished. There was something else building in her, something that needed release. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I had no idea, she said again, her voice trembling. If I had known. You couldn't have known, I said, keeping my voice gentle. He hid it well. But Margaret shook her head violently, looking down at the expense sheet still clutched in her hand like damning evidence. Did he hide it? She asked, her voice rising. Or did we all just not ask? The question landed between us with the weight of truth. He was right. Ryan hadn't really hidden anything. I'd been supporting him openly, paying bills from my accounts, using my credit cards for his expenses, managing every aspect of our household in plain sight. Margaret had witnessed it all. The elaborate Sunday meals. The organized home. The gifts I bought for her that Ryan presented as from us. She'd seen it all and never questioned it because the alternative was uncomfortable. Because women supporting men financially disrupted the expected narrative. Because asking would have meant acknowledging her son wasn't the man she'd raised him to be. I saw you, Margaret continued, her voice breaking. I saw you cooking, cleaning, organizing, managing everything. I saw Ryan contributing nothing. And I told myself you were just capable. That you were good at that stuff. That it was fine because you seemed happy to do it. She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling over. But you weren't happy, were you? You were exhausted. You were invisible. And I made you more invisible by complimenting your capability instead of questioning his uselessness. Outside, I could see the neighbors hadn't dispersed. They stood in small clusters on the sidewalk on our lawn in neighboring yards. Watching through windows. Phone still out. Claire Caldwell had moved closer to our kitchen window. I could see her face clearly, not judgment but recognition. Understanding. How many of them had seen the same thing Margaret had seen? How many had noticed the imbalance and said nothing because it was easier than confronting uncomfortable truths? Margaret straightened her spine. Wiped her eyes. When she looked at me again, something had shifted in her expression. Lauren, she said with the decisiveness of someone making a courtroom decision. What do you need from me? The question surprised me. I'd expected many things from this confrontation, but not an offer of alliance from the woman I'd thought would always defend her son. I glanced toward the window where our neighbors watched, bearing witness to this suburban implosion. I need you to see the truth and acknowledge it, I said simply. That's all. Just bear witness. Margaret nodded once, sharp and certain. Then she turned to Ryan with an expression that made him physically recoil. I'll be staying at the Marriott tonight, she said, her voice cold and final. When I come back, if I come back, I expect to find you prepared to have a very different conversation about your marriage and your contributions to it. She tucked the binder under her arm like evidence she was taking to trial and walked toward our front door. Ryan found his voice finally. Mom, wait. No. She didn't even turn around. You humiliated yourself, Ryan. In front of your neighbors. In front of your wife. In front of me. You need to sit with that. You need to understand what you've done. She opened the front door and walked out. Into our yard where at least 15 neighbors stood watching. The silence was absolute. Margaret walked through them with the dignity of someone who'd spent 3 decades commanding courtrooms. Her head high. Her shoulders back. The binder visible under her arm. The neighbors parted for her. I watched Claire touch Margaret's arm gently as she passed. A gesture of solidarity or support, I couldn't tell which. Margaret got into her silver BMW and drove away. For a moment nobody moved. The neighbors stood frozen, processing what they'd just witnessed through our kitchen window. Then slowly in pairs and small groups they began to disperse. But not before I caught their expressions. Claire's face held something like respect. Susan Patel looked thoughtful, almost contemplative. Even Mr. Harrison nodded at me through the window before shuffling back to his own yard. They'd heard Margaret scream. They'd gathered expecting an emergency. Instead they'd witnessed something else entirely. A public reckoning. A truth told loudly enough that it couldn't be ignored or explained away. Ryan and I stood in our kitchen. Our dining room visible through the doorway with its $180 worth of catering still sitting unopened on the table. You planned this, Ryan said finally, his voice hollow. You wanted this to happen. I looked at him. Really looked at him. This man I'd married 6 years ago. This man I'd supported, funded, managed, organized around. This man who'd convinced himself I was the problem. I documented the truth, I said calmly. That's all. The rest was your doing. My mother screamed, he said like I hadn't noticed. She screamed in our house and now the entire neighborhood knows, I finished. Yes. They know now. They know what you've been doing for 6 years. They know who's actually been funding your lifestyle. His face flushed red. This is insane. You're making me look like... Like what? I asked. Like someone who contributed $47,000 over 6 years while I contributed $384,000? Like someone who demanded separate finances while benefiting massively from joint ones? Like someone who called his wife financially irresponsible while she paid for everything? He had no answer. The numbers don't lie, Ryan, I continued, my voice still eerily calm. Your mother knows that. She's an attorney. She spent 30 years dealing with cases exactly like this, financial abuse disguised as marriage. And she just realized her son is the abuser. Don't call it that, Ryan said quickly. It wasn't abuse. I didn't mean to. Didn't you? I asked. You told me I was funding your pathetic lifestyle. You demanded I take financial responsibility for myself. You've been telling me for months that I spend too much, that I'm not pulling my weight, that you're tired of carrying the financial burden. I walked to the refrigerator and pulled down the expense sheet. Every word was projection, Ryan. Every accusation you made was actually a confession. He stared at the sheet like it might bite him. What happens now? He asked quietly. I folded the expense sheet carefully. Now, you pay your half of the bills. Every month. On time. You buy your own food, do your own laundry, manage your own schedule. You figure out how to be an actual adult instead of someone's dependent. And us. His voice cracked. What about us? I looked at him standing in our kitchen. The kitchen I'd maintained for 6 years. The kitchen he'd destroyed yesterday trying to cook a single meal. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if there's an us to save. But I know I'm done being invisible. I'm done being taken for granted. I'm done funding someone else's delusions while my own accomplishments get dismissed. Ryan's phone started buzzing. Text messages coming in rapid succession. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his face went pale. "What is it?" I asked. "The neighborhood group chat," he said faintly. "Someone posted video of my mother in our kitchen." Of course they had. I'd seen the phones out. Seen the recording happening. "What are they saying?" I asked, genuinely curious. Ryan scrolled, his face getting paler with each message. "They're saying," he stopped. Swallowed. "They're on your side. They're saying they're calling me." He couldn't finish. Just handed me the phone. I scrolled through the messages. Dozens of them coming in fast. "Holy hell, did you hear Margaret Davis screaming? I got it on video. Ryan's been living off Lauren's money for 6 years. $384,000 to $47,000? Are you kidding me? He called her financially irresponsible while she paid for everything? Margaret said he became the kind of man she spent her career protecting women from. Damn. Lauren's been cooking those Sunday meals for his mother and he never contributed? That's messed up. I always wondered why she looked so tired. Now we know." Claire Caldwell had posted, "If anyone needs to talk about financial dynamics in marriage, my door is open. What we witnessed today is more common than people think." Susan Patel replied, "Seconded. And Lauren, if you're reading this, we see you now. We should have seen you before." I handed the phone back to Ryan. His face had gone from pale to gray. Everyone's going to know." "Yes," I said. "Everyone's going to know the truth. That's what happens when you demand separate finances and then can't afford your half. The truth becomes visible." He looked at me like I was a stranger. "Who are you?" "Someone who stopped accepting being invisible," I said. "Someone who decided her contributions deserved acknowledgement. Someone who got tired of being called a burden by the person she was carrying." I walked past him toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To my room," I said. "To read. To enjoy the quiet. To exist in my own space without managing yours." "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had no conviction. "No," I agreed. "It's not. But it's different now. And it will never go back to what it was." I went upstairs and closed the bedroom door. Below I heard Ryan moving around. Heard him on the phone, probably calling his mother, though she wouldn't answer. Heard him in the kitchen finally dealing with the catering that had never been eaten. Outside, the afternoon sun slanted across our neighborhood. Somewhere, neighbors were still talking about what they'd witnessed. About Margaret's scream. About the truth that had finally, brutally, necessarily come to light. I lay on my bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, Ryan would have to figure out how to pay $2,100 in bills he'd never budgeted for. Tomorrow he'd have to buy his own groceries and cook his own meals. Tomorrow he'd have to face a neighborhood that knew exactly who he was and what he'd done. But today, in this moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years. Not happiness. Not triumph. Just the quiet, profound relief of truth finally spoken aloud. The quiet in our house that night was different from any silence we'd shared before. Not comfortable. Not companionable. Just empty, like a room after furniture's been removed and you can see all the damage that was hidden underneath. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Ryan move around downstairs. Heard him finally dealing with the catering, containers opening, the scrape of utensils, the refrigerator door opening and closing. Then silence again. Around midnight I heard his footsteps on the stairs. They paused outside our bedroom door. I held my breath, waiting to see if he'd knock. If he'd try to come in. If he'd attempt some conversation or reconciliation or explanation. The footsteps moved past. Down the hall to the guest room. The door closed with a soft click. I exhaled and rolled over, pulling the comforter around myself. My bed. My room. My space. For the first time in 6 years I didn't have to negotiate for it. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. I woke at 5:30, made my single cup of coffee, dressed for work in the master bathroom without worrying about waking Ryan. He was already in the guest room. Already separate. Already learning what it meant to manage his own space. I left the house at 7:15, same as always. Claire Caldwell was waiting by the mailboxes at the end of our street. Not obviously waiting, she was checking her mail, going through envelopes. But when she saw me, her face shifted into an expression I couldn't quite read. Concern. Curiosity. Something else. Lauren, she said as I approached. Do you have a minute? I stopped, keys in hand. Sure. She glanced back toward our house, then at me. What your mother-in-law said yesterday. About you paying for everything. Is that actually true? I could have deflected. Could have said it was complicated, that families shouldn't air private matters, that Margaret had been upset and perhaps exaggerated. Instead I said, every word. Claire's expression shifted. For how long? 6 years. She made a small sound, not quite a gasp, not quite a sigh. Something in between. Mark and I had no idea, she said. We thought, well, we didn't think about it, I guess. You seem to have everything so together. That was the problem, I said quietly. I made it look effortless. So nobody questioned whether it should be effortless. Claire nodded slowly. He understood. She was a CPA. She knew what numbers meant, what patterns revealed, what imbalances looked like when you actually examined them. If you need anything, she said, squeezing my arm. We're here. Mark and I. We see you now. The phrase stuck with me all day. We see you now. Like I'd been invisible before. Which, in a way, I had been. At work, I threw myself into the new VP responsibilities with an intensity that surprised even me. Strategy meetings for Q4 campaigns. Team reorganization. Budget allocation. The work was complex and demanding and completely within my control. Nobody at Morrison Digital called me financially irresponsible. Nobody questioned my contributions. Nobody took credit for work I'd done. My assistant knocked on my office door around 3 p.m. Lauren, you have a personal call. Margaret Davis. She says it's important. I picked up, curious. Margaret. Lauren. Her voice was steadier than it had been Sunday, but I could still hear the strain underneath. I wanted to tell you something before you heard it elsewhere. I waited. I've made an appointment with a therapist, she said. For Thursday. To talk about why I didn't see what was happening. Why I enabled Ryan's behavior by never questioning it. I sat back in my chair, genuinely surprised. Margaret had always seemed so certain. So confident in her assessments. The idea of her seeking therapy felt like watching a mountain decide to move. That's good, Margaret, I said carefully. That takes courage. It's terrifying, she admitted. I'm 62 years old. I spent 30 years protecting women from exactly what Ryan did to you. And I missed it. I watched it happen and told myself it was fine because you seemed capable. Her voice broke on the last word. I turned your competence into justification for his uselessness, she continued. I made you smaller by complimenting how well you handled everything instead of asking why you were handling everything alone. We sat in silence for a moment, connected by phone across the city. Can I ask you something? Margaret said finally. And I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Do you think the marriage can survive this? Or is it already over? The question I'd been asking myself for 3 days. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if I want to go back to being invisible. But I also don't know if Ryan's capable of real change or if he's just scared right now. That's fair, Margaret said. That's more than fair. For what it's worth, I've told him he needs to earn his way back into any kind of relationship with you. That the burden is entirely on him to prove he can be different. What did he say? Margaret laughed, but it was hollow. He cried. Then he got angry. Then he cycled back to crying. He's a mess, Lauren. Which is probably where he should be. After we hung up, I sat at my desk looking out over the city. Wondered what Ryan was doing. If he was actually reflecting or just panicking. If he understood what he'd lost or was still focused on what he thought he was owed. Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed with a Venmo notification. Ryan had sent $1,650. The memo line read, "Mortgage my half." I stared at it for a long moment. The first time in 6 years he'd paid his actual share of the mortgage on time. Without prompting, without complaint. Thursday, $170 for utilities. Friday, $280 for his half of groceries. Each payment arrived with no message, no explanation. Just money transferred, obligations met. I checked his Instagram out of curiosity. He hadn't posted since Saturday. 3 days without content, which for Ryan was unprecedented. His last post was that gym equipment photo with the caption about grinding and empire building. The comments had been cleaned out. Whatever criticism had flooded in after Sunday, he deleted it all. His follower count had dropped 247 to 198. People jumping ship from his motivational fitness brand now that the neighborhood knew the motivation was funded entirely by his wife. Thursday evening, I came home to find the kitchen spotless and a note on the counter. Ryan's handwriting, precise and careful. Sold my gym membership to Premium Fitness. Moving to community center starting next week, $30 per month instead of $199. Selling my kettlebells and equipment on Facebook Marketplace. First therapy session scheduled for Monday at 4 p.m. Will need to leave work early. R. No apology. No explanation. Just information. Facts. Accountability. I read it twice looking for subtext or manipulation. Found none. Just a man reporting his decisions, taking responsibility for his own finances, acknowledging he needed help. It was the most adult communication I'd received from him in years. I folded the note and walked upstairs. Pulled open my desk drawer where I'd stored the USB drive with our financial documentation. The evidence of 6 years of imbalance. I placed Ryan's note next to it. Evidence of rock bottom. Evidence of what might, possibly, maybe, be the first tiny step toward change. That night I made dinner for myself. Lemon chicken with roasted vegetables and wild rice. Plated it nicely. Ate at the kitchen table with a book propped against the salt shaker. Halfway through my meal Ryan came home. I heard him enter through the garage, heard his footsteps pause when he saw me at the table. "That smells good," he said quietly. I didn't look up from my book. "There's chicken in the fridge if you want to make some for yourself." Silence. Then, "I don't know how." "YouTube has tutorials," I said. "Or there's a basic cooking class at the community center. Tuesday nights." More silence. Then the sound of him opening the refrigerator. Rummaging. The microwave beeping as he heated up leftovers from the catering we'd never eaten. He sat at the other end of the table. We ate in silence, him with his phone, me with my book. Not comfortable. Not companionable. But not hostile either. Just two people existing in the same space, no longer pretending to be something they weren't. "I paid the bills," Ryan said finally. I saw. "Thank you. It's more than I thought it would be." I turned a page in my book. "Yes. I don't know how you managed it all this time. The bills, the cooking, the cleaning, everything. While working 60 hours a week." I looked up at him then. His face was drawn, tired. He'd lost weight. Probably from the stress, possibly from actually having to feed himself. "I managed it," I said quietly, "because I had to. Because you weren't going to." He flinched but didn't argue. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that's not enough. I know sorry doesn't fix 6 years of..." He stopped. Struggled for words. "Of taking you for granted. Of being useless. Of calling you irresponsible while you carried everything." I closed my book. "Sorry isn't enough. You're right about that. But it's a start." "What do I do?" he asked. "How do I fix this?" I looked at him. This man I'd married, this man who'd become a stranger, this man who was maybe, possibly beginning to understand what he'd done. "You become someone different," I said. "You learn to cook your own meals, do your own laundry, manage your own life. You stop expecting me to be your mother and start being my partner. You prove, over time with consistent actions, that you can contribute equally instead of just consuming. And if I do that, then we'll see," I said. "But Ryan, I'm not waiting around while you figure it out. I'm living my life. If you want to be part of it, you have to earn that. Every single day." He nodded slowly, looking smaller somehow than he had a week ago. Good, I thought. Let him feel small for once. Let him understand what 6 years of invisibility felt like. Ryan finished his microwave meal in silence. Set his fork down. Looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Really talk?" "We're talking now," I said, not looking up from my book. "I mean," he stopped. Started again. "I mean, can we sit down and have an actual conversation? About everything?" I marked my place in the book and closed it. "When? Now? Or tomorrow? Whenever you have time." The fact that he was asking for my time instead of assuming he had access to it felt significant. "Tomorrow," I said. "Saturday morning. After I finish my run." He nodded, looking almost relieved that I hadn't said no outright. Saturday morning I ran 5 miles through the neighborhood. Past Claire Caldwell's house where she waved from her garden. Past the Patels who smiled and nodded. Past Mr. Harrison who actually spoke. "Morning, Lauren." The neighborhood that had witnessed my humiliation had become something else. Not quite allies but witnesses. People who saw me now in a way they hadn't before. I came home sweating, endorphins high, feeling more myself than I had in years. Ryan was sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook. He looked terrible, drawn, tired, like he hadn't been sleeping well. He'd lost weight. His gym-sculpted physique was softening without the hours of daily training he could no longer afford. "Coffee?" he offered, gesturing to the French press. I poured myself a cup and sat across from him. Waited. "I've been going to therapy," he started. His voice was rough, uncertain. "Dr. Morrison has been. She's been making me look at things I didn't want to see." I sipped my coffee. Said nothing. "She asked me to track my daily activities," Ryan continued. "Everything I do in a typical day. Then assign an hourly value to each activity based on what it contributes to our household." He slid the notebook across the table. I opened it. Saw pages of scratched-out attempts, erased lines, frustrated scribbles. "I couldn't do it," Ryan said, his voice breaking. "I couldn't assign value to my time because most of what I do doesn't create value." I looked at his attempts. Saw him trying to quantify gym time, Instagram posting, meal planning he didn't actually do, cleaning he didn't perform. 2 hours daily at the gym, he continued. That's for me. Not for us. Not contributing anything except my own ego. 3 hours weekly posting on Instagram for a business that earns almost nothing. Maybe an hour weekly actually doing something that benefits our household. He put his head in his hands. Everything else is you, Lauren. Cooking, cleaning, managing bills, maintaining the house, remembering appointments, organizing, planning. Everything. I closed the notebook and pushed it back toward him. "I called you financially irresponsible," Ryan said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I actually believed it. I convinced myself that your salary was ours to share and mine was mine to keep. That you spent too much on shoes and handbags while I was investing in my business. He laughed, but it sounded broken. "Your entire shoe collection cost maybe $2,000 over 6 years. My gym membership alone cost $12,000. My supplements cost more than your clothes. My business expenses, $47,000 to earn $3,200. "I know," I said quietly. "I know you know. That's what makes this so." He stopped. Swallowed hard. "I'm not the victim here. I'm the problem. And I didn't see it until my own mother screamed it in front of the entire neighborhood." We sat in silence. Outside I could hear someone mowing their lawn. Normal suburban Saturday sounds. "What do you want from this conversation?" asked finally. "I don't know," Ryan admitted. "Maybe just to tell you that I'm starting to understand. That I'm trying to change. That I'm..." His voice cracked completely. "That I'm sorry. Not performative sorry. Actually sorry." I looked at him. This man who'd called me a burden while I carried him. This man who was maybe, possibly starting to see what he'd done. "Hey," I said. "I hear you." That afternoon Shauna called. "Coffee? I need to talk to you about something." We met at our usual Starbucks. She was already there when I arrived, 2 lattes waiting. "I'm so glad you finally stood up to him," she said before I'd even sat down. I raised an eyebrow. "You're not usually this direct." "I've been holding this in for 6 years, Shauna said. "Watching you disappear into that marriage. Watching you become smaller and smaller while Ryan took up more and more space. Why didn't you say something?" She laughed, but it was bitter. "I did, Lauren. Multiple times. Do you remember 3 years ago when I told you Ryan was treating you like his personal assistant?" I did remember. Vaguely. A conversation that had made me defensive. "You told me I didn't understand," Shauna continued. "That Ryan was going through a transition. That marriage meant supporting each other through hard times. You said I was being judgmental." The memory came back sharper now. I'd been angry at her for weeks after that conversation. "I stopped pushing after that," Shauna said. "Because I could see you weren't ready to hear it. You'd convinced yourself that your value was in how much you could do for him. How capable you were. How much you could handle." She reached across the table and took my hand. "But Lauren, your value was never in what you did for Ryan. It was always in who you are. Brilliant. Accomplished. Kind. Organized. Successful. You didn't need him. You never needed him. Her voice got quieter. He needed you desperately. And he convinced you it was the other way around. The truth of her words broke something open in me. I started crying. Right there in Starbucks. Ugly crying that made other customers glance over and then politely look away. Shauna moved around the table to sit beside me, holding me while I finally grieved for 6 years of making myself smaller to accommodate someone else's ego. I was so stupid, I said through tears. You weren't stupid, Shauna said firmly. You were generous. You were kind. You believed the best in someone who took advantage of that. That's not stupidity. That's humanity. Tuesday, Margaret called and asked if we could have lunch. Just the two of us. We met at a quiet bistro downtown, away from our neighborhood and its watching eyes. Margaret looked different. Less polished. More vulnerable. She'd stopped wearing her courtroom armor. I need to tell you something, she said after we'd ordered. About why I didn't see what Ryan was doing to you. I waited curious. When I was building my law practice, Margaret began, I worked 80-hour weeks while Roger launched his construction company. For the first 10 years of our marriage I paid for everything. She stirred sugar into her coffee with precise movements. My mother told me I was being a fool. That Roger was using me. That I should demand he get a real job and contribute properly. I defended him viciously. Cut her off for 3 years over it. Margaret looked up at me. Roger's business eventually succeeded. We're comfortable now. So I told myself my mother had been wrong. That my investment in Roger had paid off. She paused. But looking at you and Ryan, I realized I was projecting my story onto yours. I wanted Ryan to be like Roger. Wanted your story to have the same ending as mine. So I didn't look closely at what was actually happening. What's the difference? I asked quietly. Between your story and mine? Margaret's attorney precision returned. Roger was building a real business, she said. He worked construction sites 12-hour days. Came home covered in drywall dust. His business lost money those first years because he was investing every dollar back into equipment and skilled workers. She met my eyes directly. Ryan wasn't building a business. He was playing at entrepreneurship while you funded his lifestyle. There's a difference between supporting a partner's dream and enabling their delusion. I felt something shift inside me. A piece of anger I'd been carrying toward Margaret dissolved. What Roger and I had, Margaret continued, was hard but equal. We both sacrificed. We both contributed. We both believed in a shared future. Her voice dropped. What you and Ryan had was exploitation disguised as partnership. And I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry I didn't protect you the way I protected my clients for 30 years. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I enabled him by never questioning it. By complimenting your capability instead of asking why you were doing everything alone. I made you smaller by praising how well you handled his inadequacy. We sat in silence for a moment. Are you staying with him? Margaret asked finally. I don't know yet, I said honestly. I'm waiting to see if the changes are real or just crisis management. That's wise, Margaret said. And whatever you decide, I want you to know, I'm on your side now. Not his. Yours. It was the alliance I'd never expected but desperately needed. The mother-in-law who finally saw me clearly and chose to stand with me instead of her son. That evening I sat in my home office looking at the binder of financial evidence. 6 years of imbalance. 6 years of invisible labor. My phone buzzed. Text from Ryan, therapy again tomorrow. Dr. Morrison wants to do couples sessions if you're willing. No pressure. Just offering. I stared at the message for a long time. Typed, maybe. Let me think about it. His response came immediately, take all the time you need. I'll keep working on myself either way. I set down my phone and looked out the window at our neighborhood. The place where everyone now knew our story. Where Margaret's scream had made the invisible undeniable. Change was happening. Real change maybe. But whether it was enough remained to be seen. I took all the time I needed. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. Ryan kept going to therapy. Kept paying his bills. Kept showing up to his community center job even though I knew it hurt his ego to go from fitness influencer to front desk clerk. He'd asked twice more about couples counseling. Both times I'd said, not yet. He'd accepted it without argument. That alone felt significant. 6 months after Margaret's scream, I woke on a Sunday morning to the smell of coffee. Not the burnt, over-extracted coffee Ryan used to make in a panic. Real coffee. The kind that takes attention and care. I came downstairs in my pajamas to find him at the French press, moving through the ritual with careful concentration. Bloom the grounds. Wait 30 seconds. Pour slowly. Press gently. He'd been practicing. Bernie. Trying. Morning, he said, glancing up briefly before returning his focus to the press. Morning, I replied. He poured 2 mugs. Handed me one. I tasted it. Good. Not perfect but genuinely good. The kind of coffee that showed someone cared about the process, not just the outcome. I've been taking the cooking class at the community center, Ryan said, like he was reporting on homework. 3 nights a week. Chef Marcus is teaching us basics. How to properly season. How to know when something's done without relying on timers. I nodded, sipping my coffee. I made chicken marsala last night, he continued. It was edible. Not good but edible. Progress, I guess. That's good, I said. We stood in the kitchen drinking coffee like 2 people who used to know each other and were slowly learning how to be in the same room again. I sold the last of my gym equipment yesterday, Ryan said. The kettlebells I bought for $800. Got $200 for them. Put it toward next month's mortgage. Is half of the mortgage, which he'd been paying on time, every month for 6 months straight now. The community center job is offering me more hours, he continued. 40 weekly instead of 30. With benefits. Still only $18 an hour, but it's something. Are you going to take it? Yeah. I need to. I can't keep pulling from retirement to cover my half of expenses. He said it matter-of-factly. No resentment. No martyrdom. Just acknowledgement of reality. We finished our coffee in silence. Not uncomfortable silence. Just quiet. Can we talk? Ryan asked. About us. About what happens next. I set down my mug. Okay. We sat in the living room. Neutral territory. Both of us choosing opposite ends of the couch, maintaining distance. I need to ask you something, Ryan said. And I need you to be completely honest even if the answer destroys me. I waited. Do you want to stay married? Or do you want a divorce? The question I'd been avoiding for 6 months. I don't know, I said honestly. Ryan nodded like he'd expected that answer. Dr. Morrison says I have narcissistic tendencies, he continued, his voice quiet. That I built my entire identity around being special. The athlete. The entrepreneur. The guy with potential. Instead of building identity around actually doing anything of value. He looked at his hands. She says I used your competence as proof I was special. Like, if someone as accomplished as you would support me, I must be worth supporting. But I wasn't worth supporting, was I? I was just using you. Yes, I said. No point softening it now. You weren't supporting a partner building something real, Ryan continued. You were supporting a grown man playing pretend while you did all the actual work. And I called you irresponsible for it. His voice cracked. I called you a burden while you were carrying me. And I don't know how to fix that, Lauren. I don't know how to undo 6 years of... He stopped. Took a breath. Of abuse. That's what Dr. Morrison calls it. Financial abuse. Emotional abuse. I don't like the words, but I can't argue with them. I said nothing. Let him sit with that truth. I'm not asking you to stay, Ryan said finally, looking up at me. I'm asking what you need. What would make your life better, happier? And if that answer is divorce, I'll sign the papers and move out without argument. You deserve that choice. I looked at him. This man who'd called me a leech. This man who was maybe, possibly becoming someone different. I need time, I said. Real time. Not 6 months but maybe a year or more. To see if this is genuine change or just crisis management. Ryan nodded. Okay. I need to see you maintain employment. Contribute consistently. Manage your own life without me managing it for you. Okay. I need you to continue therapy. And I need us to do couples counseling. The kind where we address power dynamics and what happened, not just communication techniques. I'll call tomorrow, Ryan said. Find someone who specializes in what I did. I took a breath. And I need you to understand that even if we stay married, we will never go back to how things were. I will never again be invisible. I will never again manage your life while you take credit. I will never again accept being called a burden by someone I'm supporting. I understand, Ryan said quietly. And I don't want to go back either. That version of me was... He struggled for words. Pathetic. Dialed. Cruel. We sat in silence. Can I ask you something? Ryan said. Yes. Why are you giving me this chance? After everything I did, why haven't you just filed for divorce? I thought about that question. Had been thinking about it for months. Because I want to see if people can actually change, I said finally. Not just say they'll change. Not just perform change for a few weeks until things get comfortable again. But actually, fundamentally become different. I looked at him directly. And because the person I married 6 years ago, before the entitlement, before the taking for granted, before all of it, that person was worth loving. I want to see if that person still exists underneath everything else. Ryan's eyes filled with tears. I'm trying to find him too, he whispered. This morning, 6 months and 2 weeks after the scream, Margaret came for Sunday lunch. But this time, everything was different. Ryan cooked. A simple roasted chicken with vegetables. Nothing fancy, but the kitchen smelled good and he moved through the space with something approaching competence. Margaret arrived at 1 p.m., punctual as always. But she wasn't wearing her courtroom armor anymore. Just comfortable clothes and a genuine smile. Something smells wonderful, she said, hugging me first. Then Ryan. Roasted chicken, Ryan said. With Chef Marcus's technique. Hoping it's actually edible. We set the table together, all three of us. Margaret folding napkins. Me arranging plates. Ryan bringing out the food. The role reversal was complete. Surreal even. We sat down to eat. Ryan's chicken was genuinely good. Not restaurant quality but solid. Competent. The work of someone who'd actually learned instead of just Googling recipes in a panic. Margaret raised her water glass. I want to propose a toast, she said, looking at both of us. To truth. To change. To the hard work of becoming better people. We clinked glasses. I'm proud of you, Ryan, Margaret continued, and I saw tears in her eyes. Not for what you accomplished in the past or what you might accomplish in the future. But for doing the hard work of acknowledging your failures and trying to fix them. That takes real courage. Ryan's jaw tightened with emotion. Thanks, Mom. Margaret turned to me. And Lauren, I'm grateful to you. For standing up for yourself. For refusing to disappear. For teaching my son, and me, what real partnership actually requires. After lunch, Ryan started clearing plates. I've got dishes, he said when I stood to help. You cooked, I pointed out. Yeah, but you've done dishes for 6 years while I did nothing. I think I can handle cleanup. Margaret and I moved to the living room while Ryan cleaned the kitchen. We could hear him washing, drying, putting things away in the correct places because he'd finally learned where things went. How is he really doing? Margaret asked quietly. Better, I said honestly. Not perfect, but better. He's paying bills. Working. Going to therapy. Learning to cook and clean. Actually contributing. And you? How are you doing? I thought about that question. I'm okay, I said. Still figuring out if I want to stay married or start over. But I'm okay either way. That's the difference now. 6 months ago I didn't think I could survive without the marriage. Now I know I can thrive without it. So if I choose to stay, it'll be because I want to, not because I need to. Margaret squeezed my hand. That's the healthiest thing I've heard in a long time. Later, after Margaret left, I stood at the kitchen window looking out at our neighborhood. The place where everyone had witnessed our implosion. Where Margaret's scream had made the invisible undeniable. Ryan came to stand beside me. Not touching but close. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not giving up on me completely. For giving me a chance to become someone different. Someone better. I looked at him. Don't thank me yet. We're not fixed, Ryan. We might never be fixed. This might still end in divorce. I know, he said. But at least if it does, it'll be because you chose what was best for you. Not because I drove you away without realizing what I was losing. We stood at the window in silence. The kitchen where Margaret screamed had become something different now. Not a crime scene. Not a battlefield. Just a kitchen where two people were learning, slowly, painfully, uncertainly, how to share space as equals. Some stories end with divorce and vindication. With clean breaks and fresh starts and never looking back. Ours was still being written. One honest conversation at a time. One bill paid on time. One meal cooked competently. One small act of accountability after another. But that scream, that beautiful, horrified, truth-telling scream, would always be the moment everything changed. The moment the invisible became undeniable. The moment my mother-in-law looked at her son and finally saw what I'd been living with. And in the suburbs of Connecticut, in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business, Margaret's scream became more than gossip. It became a reminder. That truth, when finally spoken aloud, can shatter everything. And sometimes, in the wreckage, you find the foundation to build something real. If this story of truth and transformation had you holding your breath, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Margaret opened that refrigerator and saw the truth divided right down the middle. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.